It was a dark night, and I was sitting on the floor in fetal position crying in my friend's dorm room. Because I had a secret I wanted to share with her, but I was so afraid. And I was so ashamed. But finally I gathered the courage and I said to her, Sarah, I have diabetes. Okay, I'm kidding. That story doesn't make sense the way it's told, does it, right? You must have had a major case of diabetes, like diabetes type 5. But the story makes perfect sense when I tell you that I have mental illness. I have mental illness. I have something called schizoaffective disorder, which is a mood disorder with psychotic components, kind of like a mix between bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. So yes, you could say I won the genetic lottery. And overall, I kept my illness a secret for 7 years because of something called stigma. Stigma is the shame and discrimination associated with mental illness. And I've had that my whole life. My illness started when I was 10 years old. I was bullied, became really depressed, and actually attempted suicide. And as I grew older, I developed more symptoms and had more suicide attempts at 18 and 27. And for the record, I know I don't even look 27. I'm actually 30 years old, just to clarify. Thank you for the woo. Yeah. Hey, woohoo. Brene Brown explains that there's a difference between shame and guilt, where guilt is, I made a mistake, I did something bad, where shame is, I am bad. And that's what self-stigma is as well, where I stigmatize myself, and I would tell myself, Husfa, you're stupid, you're crazy, you're never going to get better. Over and over, I would put these negative thoughts on myself, which is so horrific. Until I found a class through NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And this class was just for people with mental illness. And I realized that I was not alone and that recovery was possible. And for the first time, I shared my story with the class. And it was such a cathartic experience. I walked out of that class, I stopped feeling suicidal. I started to feel better, and I started to share my story. This is me as Batman, because Batman has a secret, I have a secret, and we're both superheroes. I started to tell my story one by one to my friends. Now, when I first got diagnosed, I shared my diagnosis with some friends, and I got really stigmatizing reactions like, oh, are you sure you're crazy? Do you really need medication? Doesn't everyone have mood swings? You look so normal. And the one that I hate the most is that someone suggested that I should try kombucha. I'm like, no thank you. That's the worst one by far. Just kidding if you're into kombucha, by the way. Now, this time, after I took that class when I told people, I came from a place of strength, where I was not ashamed of having mental illness. I recognized it was a condition just like having diabetes or a heart condition or something else. And this time, the reception of my friends was one of complete support. People believed in me, and they supported me, and they trusted me, and they asked me, how can we help you? Which meant so much. Then I became a peer mentor, and I started to work with people with mental illness and share my lived experience. And I realized that my story can save lives. So 1 year ago, in my first TED Talk, I came out, TEDx, don't want to oversell myself, came out about my mental illness and my recovery story to the world. And I had a great reception. I had people tell me, thank you for sharing your story. You've changed my perspective on mental illness. You've given me courage. I have haters too, plenty of haters. Side note, don't read the YouTube comments, they're the bane of existence. But overall, I'd say it was a good thing, but it was not without consequences. one consequence is cultural stigma. So I'm Muslim, I'm half Pakistani, half Bengali, or as white people like to call it, Indian. And there's a lot of stigma in my culture, and it's evidenced by one story that's a bit light, but serious too, is that my aunt was talking about how she wanted to arrange my marriage for a while, but she wouldn't want me to tell the guy that I have mental illness. And I'm like, Auntie, I think that's unethical, but she justified it with her own experiences. Like, then, I did not tell your uncle that I have fibromyalgia. It's like, Auntie, I don't think you did that because you met him at the wedding. Yeah. But mental illness is something you keep secret. You don't talk about it. You hide it. And my family was dismayed when I came out about having mental illness to the world. There's also non-cultural stigma, is that I'm a student in a Master's in Social Work graduate program. And I came out about my diagnosis while I was a student working with professors and mental health professionals, which was a challenge, and at times it felt like there was doubt cast upon me because of my diagnosis, though that is completely unfair. And there was a time where I went to office hours with my professor, and we were talking, and she seemed like a safe person to tell, so I told her that I had mental illness, and her reaction was, "Oh, take your meds! Take your meds!" I was like, "Lady, you're 70 years old. I can say the same to you." Yeah, I did not say that. But I mean, that's quite an egregious reaction, I would say, right? But I kept in touch with her, and I discussed her curriculum on mental health, which was really pessimistic at the time, and I helped her revamp it to become more optimistic and recovery-oriented, which is something that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't open about my own experiences. So overall, I'm thankful for what I've done. I have mental illness. I'm even proud of it. And I'm not ashamed anymore. And yes, I have to suffer consequences because I'm a stigma smasher. And I'm willing to suffer the consequences if it means that future generations don't have to. Yes, I was hoping I'd get an applause for that. Pandering, it works. Now, I'm not the only one. Mental health is a hot topic right now, and people are coming out about their experiences. Actors are coming out, musicians, comedians, TV shows and movies are incorporating mental health into their plots. And for one thing, mental illness is really common. 43.8 million adults in America experience mental illness in a given year. That's 1 in 5. That is very common. Not only that, there were the recent suicides of Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain, which were tragedies, absolute tragedies. But a positive side effect is that people are talking about suicide and talking about mental health. In fact, in 2016, 45,000 people died by suicide. Note that I say died by suicide instead of committed suicide, so I don't use stigmatizing language for something that's not a crime. That being said, I say that it is time to start the conversation about mental health. And more importantly, hold up. I'll ask for the applause break. Don't worry about it. All right. It's time to have a conversation about mental health, and it's time to listen. In fact, Prince Harry and Oprah just released a statement that they're going to start a mental health TV series. And you know something's going to be big if it involves royalty and Oprah. It's going to be huge. You smash some stigma, you smash some stigma, you smash some stigma. Okay, I knew the high schoolers would get it. Memes, yeah, that's the thing. So it's time. Dr. Patrick Corrigan, leading stigma researcher at Illinois Institute of Technology, states that the most effective way of combating stigma is for ordinary people with mental illness to come out about having a diagnosis, and it's 3 times as effective as education alone. That being said, I can't tell you whether you should or should not come out right now, because that's a personal decision. But I can tell you that you don't have to come out to the whole wide world on YouTube, and you don't have to share your diagnosis. There are risks associated with coming out. One is rejection. You might tell your friend or family member that you have mental illness, and they aren't cool with it, and you lose a connection. Maybe your boss finds out that you have mental illness at work, and you get fired, which is highly illegal, but maybe a possibility. Your friends and family might disapprove of what you're doing and think that you shouldn't talk about it, and you might feel self-conscious if you're out, not knowing who knows and how people are responding to you. That being said, there are benefits as well. Benefits is that it is empowering to be out, to accept that you're a person with an illness, not a mentally ill person, a person with a diagnosis that shouldn't have the shame that any other disorder has, is empowering, and it boosts your self-esteem to say, I'm not ashamed of having mental illness. Not only that, it protects you against self-stigma. Like, if you're willing to say, I'm not ashamed, then you can't feel the shame associated with self-stigma. And lastly, and I think most importantly, it increases your support system, which is, for me, the most vital thing I have in my life right now. So, as Smokey the Bear once said, only you can decide whether you want to come out about having mental illness or mental illness and or increase your support system. He's going to break a record for most applause breaks in the TEDx talk. Organic or inorganic, who knows? Now, if you are going to come out about having mental illness, I have some guidelines for you that come from a place of strength. Again, it's not something to be ashamed of, and if you talk to your friends and family without shame, that has a better reception. And it's not a confession. You don't have to share anything you're uncomfortable with or you're embarrassed about. Share something from the past and what's going on currently so you can show your progress or show the depth of the illness. And share with people you have a strong relationship with. Don't make assumptions like, oh, they work in the field or they know someone with mental illness, they're a safe person. Make sure you have concrete reasons for believing that they are a safe person to talk. Now, on the other hand, if you're a recipient of the information, I have some do's and don'ts. And this time the acronyms will make sense, because I don't think PEPS makes very much sense, but don't worry about it. Now, listen. Take the person seriously. Put yourself in their shoes and just take the time to listen and empathize with the person as best you can. Mental illness is something difficult to understand, that is true, but do your best to do it. Ask them how you can support them and be there for them. Disclose any experiences that you have that may be similar, whether you've experienced depression in the past or you have a family member or a friend. That's lead. See, it works. And as for don'ts, don't be judgmental. Again, mental illness is not a person's fault, and they shouldn't be ashamed of having it. Don't give unsolicited advice. Look, I know yoga is amazing and has great therapeutic benefits, but now is not the time to tell someone their problems will be solved with yoga. We all know that person, don't we? Don't be dismissive. Don't say, oh, you look so normal, or just get over it, or you'll be fine, or be dismissive that way. Don't gossip. The person told you that secret in confidence, and it's important to keep that secret. And don't expect anything, such as don't make assumptions that just because you know someone with mental illness with the same diagnosis, that they're the same person or manifest the same, because mental illness manifests differently. Here I have some resources. The National Alliance on Mental Illness offers classes for individuals, family members, and mental health professionals. The Honest, Open, Proud is a curriculum and program that's offered online and in person that has information about what to do to analyze the pros and cons of disclosing. I based a lot of my presentation based on what I learned from that. We have any teens in the house? Clap it up if you're a teenager. Yeah. I know how much you guys love texting, so there's a teen text line right here, 839-863. And if the person discloses any suicidal thoughts, call the National Suicide Hotline. Overall, I'm at a different place in my life right now. I'm not ashamed. I'm not sitting on the floor crying. I'm standing up in front of everyone strongly with the belief that it's okay to have mental illness and it's not something to be ashamed of. So I ask you guys today, after what you've heard today, will you join me in this fight and be a stigma smasher?